Mr. Hanfus, could you please tell us, go back a little bit and tell us what was your father and older brother doing during this period, and also what kind of entertainment were the Jews able to take part in, since they were not allowed to go to the theater or movies or other kinds of things?
Well, professional activity did not stop with the coming of the occupation. There were still some business which went on. My father continued to work on and off for in the handbag industry, although the business who had been owned by Jewish interest were now owned by the commissioner, because it was a process of Aryanization which took place. All the businesses had to be under control of a commissioner as the assets were taken away from them. My brother as well worked in the same line of business. I forgot to mention that he became a framer in the leather. In these days, handbags, they used metal frames, if you recall. It was not like with zippers, but it was with a frame, and he became like a framer, and he worked in that line of business. But there were periods where they were unemployed because it was not business as usual. But on and off, I remember them leaving and working for regular jobs. On top of that, my father had a little sewing machine, and he worked independently at home. Odd jobs, people would bring him work, and he would do the sewing of handbags, and felt very proud about his accomplishment when there was a particular difficult job. He was the only one to be able to do it, so he was very proud. And so we would work. He would work at home as well. So there was still, it went on and off. There was some people who still continued working. Now, as far as entertainment, it was more or less a social type of entertainment that you made with people, and you could not listen to news. You could read newspapers, you could buy them on the stand, but you were not allowed to have radio. You had to surrender all your radio, so you had to entertain with other people playing cards, or visiting each other, discussing the situation, hoping that things will be better, that the war would end very soon, and especially when there were certain spurts of hope when the U.S. entered the war in December 1941. We felt that, things would not last very long. Now the Americans were in, but that did not take place.
Did you recall any bar mitzvahs or weddings or any other kind of Jewish festivals or festive activities during this period?
I don't recall mine because I was never bar mitzvah. At the outbreak of war, I was 12, and I started to go to Hebrew school, and then the Germans came in, and everything was dislocated, and the teacher, he was a rabbi, wasn't there anymore, and it just went, and I was never bar mitzvah. So the fact that I never learned how to read Hebrew because of that period, although my mother wanted, she was very pious. So I had never had any religious upbringing, because of that particular period, it dislocated and uprooted everything in my life. My brother had, because he was older, was bar mitzvah. I remember very well when we went to the synagogue, local synagogue, and and then we had a little reception at home, with the laker and sweet cake and little bit of alcohol, bromfum we call that, and little sweets. I also remember the breasts for my kid brother very vividly. There was also the rabbi who came for circumcision at home, and we had invited some people, some friends, and there was a little reception for that event. So now we are back into the period of the 16th of July, when the cops came. My mother screamed, and they left. They were embarrassed. They left, and they said they would come back with a squad. But they did not that day. If they would have come back, probably they would have found everybody, and we would have gone. Everybody would have been arrested. They did not come back. In the morning, that was 6 o'clock in the morning, about 10 o'clock, I decided I had a great uncle who had a small business, a jewelry business, and he liked me, and we used to be very close contact with him. His business had been organized. Although he could still be there, he was not allowed to do any business. Although he occupied the shop, it was not too far from the opera place, and he was fairly well off because he was in that particular kind of business. And he was married to an Alsatian. It was his third wife, and she was not Jewish. And he spoke German at home, and I speak a little bit of German because of that. Because she spoke German, Alsatian German. His little store, which I have a picture, you will see, it's that there are all kinds of signs saying end of business. So he played an important part, because I went to see him on that particular day, and he put me up for the night. He said, "You stay with me now for a few days until maybe things are going to ease up," because he was not on the wanted list, because he was married to, first of all, he's older. He was already he was close to 70, and they did not take people of that age. The method, the selection, there was a selection already, not only in Auschwitz, but already then, there was a selection of a method of rounding up Jews were done extremely methodically. First, they would take the stateless, but even then there was a category. They wouldn't take babies or infants, but they would, and people older than 60, but everybody else. Now, with children, if a child was under the age of 16, and he was born, which was my case, he was born in France, that means he was a French citizen, he would still be, he had to follow his parents if they were aliens or stateless, if they were arrested. That was the first stage of the roundup of Jews, where they took women and children. Now, so on the 16th of July, I went to see my uncle, and I stayed with him for a couple of days. In the meantime, on the 17th of July, the next day, they came back. And that's an interesting story, because at that time, of course, we knew my brother, my mother, they knew that they were arresting women and children. Now, we had a cousin, and she was in her upper 60s, maybe 65, but she was one of these old, women, very huge, who walks very slowly, seeing, they walk and they can't move because they're overweight, and so she came to visit us in the morning. Well, I wasn't there. They came to visit her, and we saw how God that you saw you are still there. You haven't been arrested, and we're so thankful. And my daughter was arrested, and my son was arrested, and with their family, and she was arrested yesterday, and I'm so glad you're there. So my father says, they may still come in the apartment. I don't want to chase you out, but maybe you should leave because they may come any minute. Oh, I'm so glad, and she's staying on, and they made tea for her, And while she's there, all of a sudden, the police is coming, and they are banging with their shoes. Now you have a stranger, an overweight old woman who cannot go through the window. My mother, kid brother, my brother, they all go. They go out and they hide into this place. My father stays with this old woman, and he says, well, she cannot go through the window. It's impossible. So they bang. They don't force the door. They didn't open the door, but he could see through the window that they were downstairs, and they were pointing from the street, pointing to the little balcony. That's where we live with the super, because he was pointing. That's where they live. So he opened the door this way. He opened the door, this door. He pushed her out, and he said, go up, and then come down. And that woman did not speak a word of French. If they ask you anything, say, personne, nobody. Go up and go down. But when he opened the door, he didn't know that maybe there was a cop behind it. He just took a chance. So he pushed her out, and she went up, and she went down. And then he closed the door, locked the door, went into the room. 10 minutes later, they called the locksmith, opened the door, and the tea, which she had been served, the hot water was still there, and they said they must still be around because there's hot water. So they went around, searched, opened the wardrobe, and they were all in there, could not find anything. And they said, okay, we'll find them. And they left. That was on the 17th of July. The next day I came back and I found out about this this situation.
Where had you been?
With my great uncle. Now, he had asked that my brother, because he sent me back, he said, well, there had been some talk that the people, young children of 16 and over, if they were French, were allowed to stay. And I was only 15, but he felt that maybe I would fall under this particular ruling that because I was French, a French citizen, I could stay in the apartment. So my brother, we traded. My brother went And he was there for 3 weeks in his apartment. He could only take one. Now, that was from around the 18th of July 1942. Now, for about the next 10 days or so, things were very tight. We just didn't know what to expect. My mother would go down for food, or by between 3 and the hours of 3 and 4, and come back. My kid brother was not allowed to play, and although that was a problem because he was playing always in the street, he was used to go, and it was summer, and he would complain bitterly that it was not fair. Why all the other kids he could not understand. All the other kids were playing in the street, but he had to stay in and not make any noise. He could not understand that. So he would go down anyway and play. And so we had a problem with him because he would be up and down, and we never knew if the police would come while he was opening the door and running up and down the stairs. Now, on Monday night, on the fateful Monday, 3rd of August, 1942, it was a very hot day. Again, my kid brother, I forgot to mention, a few days before was Tisha B'Av, and I remember my mother fasting for that particular day. The Tisha B'Av, which is, I think, the destruction of the temple, she fasted for that particular day. She was very, So on the 3rd of August, 1942, it was in the afternoon, my kid brother, my mother decided, said, well, I'll go down, we'll go across the street. There was a family living, we lived on number 17, they lived looking the other way. This is the street. This is number 17, they lived here, number 10, just across the street. There was a family with 5 kids, all French. The parents were stateless, Polish, also in the leather industry, doing some leather goods, handbags. They had not been arrested, or nobody came on the 16th of July, and he felt that for whatever reason, that he was exempt, that because he was a good Jew who paid his taxes, who had never any problems with the police, that he would not be arrested, and maybe he had 5 children, and he did not fall under the arrest decree of rounding up. So, and that his house was safe. So my kid brother wanted to play, and he used to play with one of their children of the same age. There were 5 of them. One of them was a close friend of mine. We used to go to school, was exactly the same age. And my mother decided to, early in the afternoon, around 3 o'clock, to go across the street and to spend a few hours with them, to socialize. So she went across, number 10. At around 3:30, all of a sudden, this banging at the door. My father hides in this kitchen. I opened the door. 2 cops, one in uniform, one civilian. They have an index card with our 5 names. Where is your father? I said, I don't know. I haven't seen him since July 16th. I think he's been arrested. Where's your older brother? I don't know. Where's your mother? Well, she went down shopping. Okay, we'll wait for her. So they sit down and make small talk. And about 15, 20 minutes, They said, okay, we'll return, we'll come back. They go downstairs. I wait a few minutes. I go downstairs as quickly as possible, look around to see if they're not followed. Go up to number 10, and everybody's there. And when I'm there, maybe 10 minutes later, there's a ring at the door, and the father opens the door, and the same cops come in. Now, time stopped for me at that particular, and from that on, everything changed. That particular, the fraction of time where I still have that feeling, when the cops came in, time absolutely stopped. I knew that everything would be different from then on, and everything was. So they recognized me, said, oh, here you are, and that's your mother? Oh, fine. So we go, okay, so everybody will pack and you will follow us. So there's, the commotion with 5 kids living in a small apartment, putting things together, bags. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to pack. My mother did not. She did not say anything. She did not want to go back to the apartment. She was afraid that because she knew my father was hiding, and that she might give away, or he might collapse and he might surrender. So she didn't want to go back. So she stayed upstairs, and I went down and I went up and I told my father, and when we were both crying, we started to pack for whatever, put, woolens and whatever things we could find, a prayer book for, I remember, things, just put 2 suitcases, which I carried down. And they were downstairs already, waiting for me. And there were 4 cops, 2 civilians, and 2 uniform, regular police. And one seemed to be the leader of the operation. And he says to me, well, you're coming with us. So I said, I'm coming? He said, yes, you're coming with us. I said, well, no, I don't want to go. I'm 16 and I'm French. Where should I go and have an uncle who will take care of me? He said, you're 16, you have your ID? So I took out my identity paper, which you had to, all people from the age of 15 had to carry, and I showed him, and he said, but you're not 16, you're 15, you turned 15 just a few weeks ago, you coming with us? I said, no, my uncle will take care of me, and I don't want to go. And he said, I don't know. All of a sudden he said, okay, you're staying. Now, this wave, just this wave of hand, you staying, he would have said, you coming. He said, you staying. Now, I don't know if he was thinking that I would lead him eventually to my father and to my brother, and that they would get more people, they would get, the entire family. Maybe that's what they had in mind. But in the meantime, you're staying. So I carried the suitcases. They were actually, the roundup netted 9 people. The 5 children, including my friend, the couple, my mother and my kid brother. So I carried their suitcases until the next corner, and I said goodbye. I kissed, we kissed, and that's the last I ever saw of them. When I came back, we were absolutely destroyed. My father just didn't know what to do with, crying, just, everything is finished. We didn't have any food. The neighbor, non-Jewish, helped us. She fed us, she took pity on us. The super knew that there was a hiding place, because he knew that he didn't know how, nobody knew, but they knew that we were hiding. And he never reported, and he was very sympathetic. They helped us, these two people. The neighbor brought us in food for the next week or so. Now, in the meantime, we were staying home. My brother was still, I told my brother, I went over to my great uncle to inform my brother what happened. And that was a tearful, reunion with my brother. So, and I was back with my father in that apartment. Now 2 days later, 2 or 3 days later, that again, we are eating, my father and myself, here, in the dining area. It's 7 o'clock. It's a very quiet evening, sunny, peaceful summer evening. All of a sudden, we hear, boots, they tiptoed. You don't hear them on the steps. When they went up the steps, they tiptoed, and then when in front of the door, they started to hit, with the boots. Now, we're eating, we have 2 plates of soup. So I take 1 plate, my father is running like hell, gets into this, closes the window, I close the window, but the Venetian blind is still shaking, from the movement. Now I come back, open the book of poetry, and I open the door, and 5 cops come in, push me. Where the hell have you been? Why didn't you open the door? They push me from this, one into that, one right into here, and the thing is batting. One of them opens the window, looks out from that room, looks here, cannot imagine that this window is part of the same apartment. And he said, "Don't you worry, we'll get your father. We know you're hiding him somewhere. We'll get him eventually." And they come out. And even one guy said, "Oh, you're reading Lamartine, that's very good." He makes a comment. And they leave. And they leave me by myself. They came actually in all that period. I remember opening 10 times the door to the cops and later on to the Germans, because we had also an adventure with the Germans. They came 10 times, but that was the most traumatic, because I still remember when he opened a few days later, they came again, and they only could find me. They did not. They came and they left. Now, at that time, I got a letter from my mother asking that I should, giving me advice in Drancy, which was a transit camp, asking me to send clothing and to send food. So my uncle, I didn't know how to get about it. He said, "Well, there's a Jewish committee who takes care of these things. It's Rue de la Bienfaisance, and it's a Jewish. You have to make a package." He helped me making a package, and you should go there in the afternoon and give out the package. So one afternoon, I went to that committee, and I went up, I remember the last floor where there used to be a reception center where all the packages destined for people in Drancy were kept, because then they would be collected there and then sent by truck to the camp. And there was a woman there, older woman, he says, are you by yourself? I mean, where are your parents? So I said, well, my mother is in Drancy with my kid brother, and where's your father? I was not going to tell her that I was hiding my father. I said, I don't know. You mean he disappeared on the 16th of July? Do you have any other brother? I said, yeah, also he's gone. And you're just by yourself? I said, yes, I'm by myself. And who takes care of you? I said, well, I have an uncle, great uncle, who I see occasionally. He said, but you just by yourself? Yes. And, you know, I look so fragile and just like a kid, you know. She said, would you like to work here? I said, well, yes. She said, okay, well, the chief of personnel is a friend of mine. Maybe I'll give him a call. So she called him in front of me, and he says, well, I have a very nice boy. Maybe do you have a job? He said, oh, we need someone in the mailroom. He said, well, I'm going to send him over, and you interview him, and then if you like him, maybe, you know, and he's just by himself, and, you know. So it was 2 blocks away. They had, usually was called, they had 2 centers. One was Rue de la Bienfaisance, but the headquarters was Rue de Téhéran, which is 2 blocks away, where the headquarters, that means all the leading personalities and the vice president and the Secretary General and there was chief of personnel. Everybody was in that particular office. So I went up and I saw the chief of personnel, and he said, okay, well, fine, we need somebody, and when can you start? I said, well, can you start tomorrow? Yes, I'll be there tomorrow. So I knew that those working for the Jewish committee had a certain amount of immunity from being arrested. There were 2 types of exemptions from being arrested. If you work directly for the Germans, and in the 1941 especially, when there was a very harsh winter, and the Russian front, they needed furs, and Jews were, as you know, were employed there were a lot of furriers. Some of them worked on furs, and they were granted a certain Ausweis permit that they were needed for the production effort, and they would not be arrested. The Jewish Committee also, because they assisted Jews, it was one of the organizations which was set up by the Vichy government to assist Jews. It was a smokescreen to, you know, that they are protected by their own organization. The same thing happened in all the occupied countries where they set up a Jewish committee, and in France was no any difference. Those working were exempted from arrest, so they said, as well as their families, not the older brother, but the younger brother. So when I knew that, and I immediately realized that it might be a salvation for my father, and it was indeed. So when I came home, and it took me quite a bit of time to come home because there were some formalities, you know, of employment, filling out a form or something, and asking all kind of information. My father had requested, he was out of tobacco, and that I should buy some tobacco. He was a heavy smoker, especially under these tense moments, that I should buy some tobacco on the black market. He was out of cigarettes, and he couldn't stand it any longer. He didn't know where I was. It was already 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. I wasn't there. I'd been gone all day with a package, you know, parcel, and I had not returned. He thought maybe he had been arrested. And so he packed And he said, they would have come that day, I would have opened the door. But instead of the police, I came and I told him the good news, that I would be employed by that agency and we may have some kind of protection. Although he did not know if it would apply to him because he had been wanted by the police. Now, so I started to work for them as a mail clerk for UGIF. My functions were very simple. I had to deliver the mail, when the mail entered, they were addressed to various people. And I would make the rounds and pick up, there was an ad box, pick up the mail, the various letters, go up to my little office where there were other people working, and register the mail and stamp it and mail it out. That was my function. The card which helped us, which I will show later on, was delivered. It took about 3 weeks before it was registered and stamped by the High Commissioner for Jewish Affairs and by the German authorities, with my name, saying that I was a clerk, and by the vice president of the organization, with the name of my father in the back, and I had put down also the name of my mother. In the meantime, I received, and I will show you later on, the little card saying that she had been deported on the 14th of August with my kid brother. Now, it was, I don't know if I had received that card, if I would have been able to get her out. I doubt it. I don't know, but it was maybe a matter of days. I don't know. In the meantime, she was deported, and she left on the transport. It's been documented 19, and she arrived in Auschwitz on the 9th. She left on the 14th of August, and on the transport 19, and arrived in Auschwitz on the 19th, and was selected automatically with a child. Now, of course, we didn't know all that. I was working for this organization. My father was able to normalize his situation because there was some a liaison fellow in the organization who dealt with the police, and I remember went to see him, explaining that my father had returned from wherever he was.
I can take that.
Yes.
I can take that, or you can put it.
Yes.
I don't want it to interfere with your face.
And and one day he took him to the police headquarters, and he was actually, his situation was normalized, that he was protected by me, and there was a photostatic copy of my card, which allowed me to work for this organization and to be exempt from arrest. So he was able to walk around free, so to speak, in and not to be, and they didn't come anymore. For apparently was a link between the police headquarters, and they had his name, and there was a. Now, my brother, who was not covered by me, and who could not stay in with my great uncle, returned to the apartment and stayed in that little kitchen for 13 months. He would sleep there. We had set up a little mattress, and in the evening, because he felt more safe, he would go in. Sometimes he would sleep with us here, but many times he would be there, and if there was a knock at the door, immediately he would.
What was what street were you living on?
Here?
The address, yeah.
Rue Henri Chevreau, on the 17th, Rue Henri Chevreau. He had no ration card, that means we had to share whatever food we had. There was no toilet, as I mentioned, so we had to carry chamber pots, for, off hours that we could not meet anybody in the staircase. Life went on that way. I was able to get authorization to bring some food, because I had in a canteen, like organization cafeteria, and requested, because since I didn't have any mother, if they could authorize me to bring some food at home for me and my father, and they authorized, so I would bring a little pot of soup, or whatever they gave me, little meat, whatever. And my father was a pretty good cook, who would supplement that with whatever he bought on the black market, and we would share with my brother.
At what point did they know that your father, so-called, returned or had been living with you since you originally declared that he was missing?
I would say, as soon as I received that card, granting me a certain amount of immunity, all of a sudden I said my father came back, and I went to see the officer in charge of the liaison with the police, and said if, since he was going to the police headquarters practically every day, if my father could come along, that it would be normalized and showing that I was a regular employee of this UGIF organization. And it was part of his job, and that's what he did. He went. My father was not, he was afraid, but they accepted. They said fine, and they stamped his card, like, now he continued to work on and off for non-Jewish Aryan bosses, and there was still a certain, as I mentioned, certain activity which still went on, even though it was there was no much leather, and it was ersatz or whatever. It was not plastic, wasn't invented, but it was some kind of ersatz leather that they use for bags, and he worked on and off, although we basically live from the meager salary that I brought back. It was minimum wage, but it didn't make any difference. In the meantime, my brother was living with us, and we were still talking about when my mother would come back, when we'd all be together. So I had, there was also social activities within the organization, Jewish Boy Scouts, which I joined, and it became like on Saturdays and Sundays I would meet there, and we put up plays, or there was in Copernic synagogue, which was by the way bombed. There was a few years ago, if you recall, we would meet there and we would sing Hoaz and Zionist songs, Jewish songs. We would spend the day that way. We were like a group of 10 youngsters. Some of them worked with me in this organization, and that's how I got into that. And we even put up plays. Became like, not that there were too many talent in that direction, but anyway, we just put up a certain play. That was it went on until 1943. Now, in 1943 became extremely harsh for Jews because they would pick up any Jew, even although the Vichy government. Oh, by the way, I should mention that in November 1942, the Allies landed on the 8th of November, landed in North Africa, and on the 11th of November, the Germans occupied all of France. There was no more line of demarcation, and there was no more occupied zone. Everything was occupied, north and south, and it was all of France was under German control. Things became very hard, especially after Stalingrad, for Jews, because we felt that they would take it out on the Jews, and they did. If you were caught for anything, if you didn't have the Jewish star, or if you broke the curfew, or if you were denounced, you would be arrested and sent to Drancy and deported, regardless if you were Jewish or not. Then they extended the groups of arrests, and first it was stateless in July 1942. Then they extended to other groups. It became the Polish, and they became the Romanian, and they became the Hungarians, and they became all the other the Belgian, all the nationalities became part of that, and they started to deport children also, which they had never done before. The transport where my brother was deported, the transport that actually was the first transport where children were deported to Auschwitz in August 1942. Now I'm going forward, and it's 1943. Now there's a very curious experience which happened, and another luck, if you can call it that way. Now I'm on vacation, 2 weeks. We were allowed entitled to vacation. Of course, you don't go anywhere, you stay home. I'm seeing my granduncle, or playing chess with my brother, and play chess. And my father was at a job for doing some work for Aryan boss, and he's coming. He had delivered his work, and he was coming downstairs, and he hears up somebody coming from there, and he turns around, and there's an SD, Sicherheitsdienst, and he sees him with a star. He says, "You dirty Jew," and he slaps him. "What do you have in your suitcase?" He said, "Nothing, I just delivered work." Work? Let's go back to your boss. Let's see if you're legal. Are you legal? Yes, I mean, my son works for UG. He said, "That's worthless." Okay, let's go back to see. You probably work. You were illegal anyway. So he goes back. He says, "Go." So they go in, the SS, and he says, he spoke perfect French, that fellow. He must have been part of the, I don't know. He was absolutely bilingual. His French was impeccable, the SS. Maybe he was French, I don't know. Of course, he spoke German, but perfect. So they said, "Does this man work here?" "Yes." "Can I see the books where he's registered?" "Oh, but we don't have the accountant. The accountant is not there." He says, "Fine." He says, you ask the accountant to be there this afternoon, 3 o'clock, and I want this man to be here with the accountant, and I'll be there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My father comes home with this awful story. He said, "What?" Yeah, I said, "But I don't know." He said, "Okay," he said, "You come with me you know, you have the original of this because I have only a photostatic copy. You come with me, and I said, fine. I come with you, fine. So at 3 o'clock we're there, and at 3:30, German car stops, chauffeured limousine. He comes out, comes up. Oh, the son is there, fine. He said, I have everybody, you are arrested. I have received orders. You coming with us. You are arrested. Let's go back to your apartment. You're going to pack, and that's it. But no, it's worthless. You are arrested, both of you. I don't have to see the books. Let's go. Now, my brother was in the apartment. Now, we had told him if we make any noise, you know, you run into the hiding place. Now, we made noise because we lived on the second floor, here we live on the second floor. Now, we opened the door. He was already in there. And this German looks around. He said, that's nice furniture. All of that will be good for civilians. You know, you Jews, you've killed them with your bombings. So my father, who spoke German, because he had worked during the First World War in Germany in the mining field, you know, he spoke German. He had been in Berlin. He said, we're not responsible for the war. We're just working people. I didn't make the war. Look, we live like very simple. We're not rich. We're just working people. He said, I don't care. He says, one for 100, 100 for one. You pack. Then he says, what's up there? He saw those books. I said, that's those textbooks from class. You know, my heart really stopped, because if he would have removed the book, then he could have seen that there's a door behind it. He said, okay, you pack. And so, I said, well, that's finished. That's it. So we packed whatever we could to 3 suitcases. Went downstairs. He took us on that beautiful car with chauffeur, and he said, well, this is your last, I'm going to give you a tour of Paris, because that's the last time you see Paris. You know, you might as well have a good impression of Paris. So he gave us a grand tour, showed us the Champs-Élysées. He said, look around, you'll never see Paris again, so you better look around, nice. Then he stops with the Saussay, and that's the Gestapo headquarters. Now you come in, I remember, with our suitcases. There's a staircase. You walk in an office, all German with the SD, Sicherheit, security, you know. There's a portrait of Hitler. And he said, okay, you stand there. The chief wasn't there. They're all officers, you know, discussing things. So we wait. 10 minutes later, a little German functionary, you know, with glasses, walks in, and they're all wise. Hi, Hitler! You know, all these. He looks at us. He said, what are these two people? So the officer who had arrested us, he said, well, you see, German, of course, they are illegal. I arrested the father. He's in illegal. He works illegally. So I said, I beg your pardon. You know, he spoke German. I'm not illegal. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not illegal. I mean, I work here. I mean, I have working permit. My son works for the UGIF, and we am protected by his work. He said, so the officer, he said, Well, you see, look at how the Jewish race spreads over the world. The mother was Hungarian, the father is Polish, the son now is French. So my father said, first of all, my wife was not Hungarian, she's Polish, and the son is French, he was born in Paris, yes. So, you know, you could see he did not like, for whatever reason we don't, that's a miracle. He did not, he said, but I don't understand why you arrested them. And he said, what is your trade? To my father. He said, well, I make very luxury handbags, you know. He said, I'm a very skilled worker. So he says, and he could see the other fellow, he was losing ground, and he says, you know, the rule, when one member of the family is deported, the entire family has to be deported. The mother was deported, we have to deport the father and the son. So my father said, listen, my rule is maybe now, but my wife was deported a year ago. He said, you say that you are a skilled worker in leather? Do you think you could make a bag for me? He said, of course, handbag, sure. I mean, of course I have no leather. He said, oh, I have plenty of leather. I have plenty of leather. He says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let you go, but you have to come back next week. I'll have the leather for you. He said, okay, you can let him go. Okay, out. The officer could, you know, I could not believe it, you know, because what did it mean for him that for us to be, you know, it was unusual to be out from the Gestapo, you know. So he says, okay, well, you can go. Okay, he said, well, I can go out. I need I can go out. He said, okay, I'll let you, I'm going to accompany you to the door. My belief is that there must have been some kind of hostility between the officer, he didn't like him, and he did certain things that he didn't like, and it was a put down, and because what did it mean for us to be sent to Drancy, you know? And that's my interpretation when I think back, you know. So anyway, we were out. And we appeared, my brother did not believe it. He was already on the verge of packing, of trying to leave the apartment because he knew that the officer said, tomorrow I'll come and I'm going to empty the apartment with a truck for our bombed out civilians in Germany, you know. So we knew that he had to leave immediately. He could not believe it. Now, the dilemma was, should he go back the following week and take a chance? Or he said, but where are we going to go? We have nowhere to go. Now, if I said, are you going to go back? He said, okay, I'll take that chance. I'll go back to that. So I said, okay. In the meantime, I had warned my office, because there was also a German liaison, you know, between the German authorities and this. But
we're running out of tape.
Okay.
I don't want to stop the story
Okay.
in the middle, but we're out of tape. It'll
Oh.
just take you 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
okay, it's getting
Oh,
always.
it's like-
yeah. So